In a kingdom as vast as Pharloom, there exists a multitude of different groups of bugs, each with their own agendas and goals. Among these groups is a small and largely forgotten order of the Pinstresses, a very small order, at least in the terms of numbers during the age we encountered them, but not powerless at all. By the time Silksong takes place, the order of the Pinstresses has already been all but erased. In total, we see 3 Pinstresses in the game. One is dead, one has set aside her needle in favor of a more peaceful life, and only one of them remains a Pinstress in a true sense of the word, still holding on to old traditions. As the name suggests, they are a caste of highly trained warriors wielding Pharloom's traditional weapons, the pins. What's immediately interesting about them is where they choose to live. Each of the Pinstresses resides at the very edges of Pharloom, inside strange balloon-lifted houses suspended above ground. All of them, that is, except one, whose home appears to have been destroyed, but we'll come back to that later. The renowned Pinstresses serve a mechanical role similar to the Nail Masters from Hollow Knight, providing Hornet with useful skills such as the Drifter's Cloak and the Needle Strike ability. The Pinstresses are few in numbers and appear to be exclusively female. Out of these remaining warriors, only one continues to actively uphold the order and its traditions, and that being the Pinstress. She can be found living on the outskirts of the blasted steppes inside her balloon house, reachable only after defeating a guarding boss. Her isolation is deliberate and her home reflects it. Once you enter her home, you're met with the sight of the Pinstress in a state of deep meditation, pondering all the questions of the universe at once, or in other words, sleeping. When awakened, she doesn't seem to be pleased to find a stranger inside her home, which is a bit odd for someone who quite literally has a sign posted to indicate where she's located, but this reaction makes sense once you understand her history. Before revealing anything about her past, she first teaches Hornet the Needle Strike ability. Functionally, it mirrors the nail arts from Hollow Knight, but with a key difference. Rather than having 3 fixed moves, each crest will grant Hornet one unique needle art ability. Only after acquiring this ability can Hornet learn more about the Pinstress. When revisited after some time, the Pinstress may either be standing or seated inside her home. If you try to speak to her while she's standing, she'll simply tell you to leave. If seated, she opens up, and it's here that the truth of the Pinstresses is revealed. Hornet asks her why she chooses to live in these storm-swept caverns rather than somewhere more hospitable. The Pinstress initially claims it's a way to keeping her mind sharp and not going soft. While that may be part of the truth, the real reason soon becomes clear. The Pinstresses live at the edges of Pharloom because they are hiding from the Citadel. According to the Pinstress, the Grand Citadel once worked alongside her order, learning and benefiting from their teachings. Eventually, however, those teachings were turned against them, and despite the Pinstress's superior needle techniques, the Citadel had strength in numbers, something the Pinstresses always lacked. By the present day, other than herself, only one Pin sibling remains, hidden away in the forgotten corners of Pharloom, having abandoned her battle for more peaceful pursuits. From this, we can tell that the Pinstress is deeply aware that she is the last true remnant of her order, something further reinforced by her needle in text, which reads, "The flurried dance of battle swung swift, warriors sprout in battle's mists, lethal talents beyond compare, I remember you my sisters past, you were the finest, bravest cast, an order lost of maidens fair." It's fairly obvious that the Pinstress longs for the days of glory and battle her order once knew, but in this age, the only one capable of giving her that is Hornet. In the final act of the game, if you revisit the Pinstress's home, you'll find a note left behind explaining that she has ascended Pharloom's mountain and is waiting for a challenger willing to face her. You can also find this wish up on the wish board called the Fatal Resolve. This is the Pinstress's wish, to die a noble battle rather than slowly succumbing to the collapsing kingdom. She is found in a small clearing atop of Mount Fae, asleep in the snow. When awakened, she is visibly eager, almost relieved to see Hornet and immediately offers herself to battle. If you refuse, she appears disappointed, almost depressed. But if you accept, you'll witness the true strength of the Pinstress. Interestingly, the music used in this fight wasn't originally intended for its current purpose. The track that plays during the Flea minigames is internally titled The Pinstresses Battle, implying it was originally meant to be her theme. It was likely repurposed because it didn't quite fit the theme of the battle, but you can judge that for yourself. After defeating her, she's thrilled by the battle you shared, yet disappointed all the same. The entire point of the duel was for one of you to die a noble death. Yet Hornet refuses to deliver the final blow, believing that the kingdom can still be saved and that the warrior of the Pinstresses caliber should not die for such a trivial purpose. Impressed by Hornet's skill and resolve, the Pinstress bestows an emblem of her order upon Hornet, formally introducing Hornet as a Pinstress. Mechanically, this emblem is a blue tool that significantly reduces the charge time of the Needle Strike ability, similar to the Nailmaster's Glory from Hollow Knight. Another noteworthy detail is that the Pinstress also has a different needling text at this point, one that essentially retells everything we just discussed but in rhyme. Pin's edge, kingdom speak, a noble end is all we seek. Sisters faded, all's adrift, one final clash, one final gift. And finally, not hugely important but still interesting, the Pinstress also has dialogue that, if undiscovered, will point you towards the Brightwain, a sub-area of Mount Fae. It's not particularly significant to the lore, but it's a nice detail nonetheless. Other than the Pinstress, another living member of the Order of the Pinstresses, not counting Hornet now, is the Seamstress. She resides on the opposite edge of the Pharloom in a far more hospitable region known as the Farfields. Like the Pinstress, she lives in a strange balloon-lifted house suspended above the ground. Once inside, you'll find the Seamstress operating a large loom endlessly weaving threads. From the outset, her priorities differ sharply from those of the Pinstresses, as she shows little interest in Hornet's combat skills. Instead, she's far more intrigued by Hornet's origin and her purpose in Pharloom. The Seamstress demonstrates a notably deeper understanding of the Citadel, its condition, its influence, and its broader purpose than her sister ever lets on. She's aware of the Weaver's existence and even alters her dialogue depending on whether Hornet has previously encountered Lace within the Citadel. Most of this dialogue shift happens on Hornet's side, but the Seamstress herself also responds differently. The most significant difference occurs during Hornet's departure after receiving the Drifter's Cloak. If Hornet has not yet met Lace, her dialogue reflects uncertainty, particularly regarding who controls the Citadel and how the Silk Curse operates. However, if Lace has already been encountered, Hornet speaks with confidence, clearly understanding the nature of the curse and those responsible for it. What stands out the most though is the Seamstress's reaction, as she isn't particularly shocked when Hornet mentions pale beings exerting control over dead husks. This strongly implies that she was already aware, or at least suspicious, of such forces long before Hornet's arrival. Taken together, this dialogue suggests that the Seamstress attempted to uncover the true purpose of the Citadel long ago, and this may explain why the Order of the Pinstresses was targeted for extermination in the first place. Perhaps they learned something they were not meant to know, and the Citadel went through great lengths to ensure that the Seamstress herself would be killed. Along the path to her home, you inevitably encounter a massive automaton known as the Fourth Chorus. It lies trapped beneath the rubble with a golden pin embedded into its neck, seemingly deactivating the construct entirely. The Fourth Chorus was almost certainly deployed with a singular purpose to kill the Seamstress, yet she appears to have bested the machine and left it dormant for a long period of time, as indicated by the corrosion along its lower half by the time we encounter it. Interestingly, the chorus will not activate immediately. Even if you leave the room and return, it remains dormant. Only after Hornet acquires the Drifter's Cloak does the automaton react to her presence, possibly because it senses some trace of the Seamstress on Hornet. All of this paints the Seamstress as far more mysterious than she initially appears, a character clearly withholding information and deliberately hiding parts of herself, and nowhere is that more apparent than in her needling text. spin and spin, forget the dead. Fix the fabric, roll the hem. Mend the tears and twine the thread. Darn it, stitch it, make it whole. This text, particularly the beginning, suggests that the seamstress is mourning someone, and possibly blaming herself for their death. One interpretation is that the seamstress uncovered the forbidden truth about the citadel, and that curiosity may have led to the destruction of her order, leaving her burdened with the guilt and grief. Lines like the "forget the dead" could reflect her attempt to push those memories aside, while the rest of her needling text reads like an effort to distract herself from the weight of those actions. Another interpretation of this text is far more literal. The dead she speaks about may be those she killed directly, battles she now regrets. This would align with her abandonment of her pin in favor of more peaceful work, as the pinstress herself mentions. Like her sister, the seamstress shares a deep fear of the citadel. After exhausting her dialogue, she urges Hornet to leave, implying that if the citadel is pursuing Hornet, she wants no part in drawing its attention. Beyond her intelligence, the seamstress is also, unsurprisingly, an exceptional seamster. It is through her that Hornet acquires the Drifter's Cloak ability, allowing her to glide and ride wind currents upwards. Notably, this is the same ability used by the Pinstress during her final battle with Hornet, implying that the seamstress once upgraded her sister's cloak as well. And speaking of the Pinstress, if Hornet approaches the seamstress while wearing the pinned badge awarded after the duel, new dialogue becomes available. "That's a fancy pin you're flaunting upon your cloak there. Here's hoping you didn't have to kill to claim it." The emblem was given freely, seamstress, as a reward for a fierce duel won fair. This exchange visibly eases the seamstress's concern. Despite their separation, it is clear that the two sisters still care deeply for one another. She expresses surprise that her stoic sister would part with the badge so freely, but quite relieved that her sister softened over the years, as the seamstress herself is not fond of the old ways, though she does admit that some rituals and memories are worth preserving. Finally, traveling directly north from the seamstress's location leads to the most enigmatic remnant of the Order of the Pinstresses. Another sister can be discovered dead in the putrefied docks near the Wreath of Purity. We know this is another member of the Order of the Pinstresses by the floating house visible in the background. Although heavily damaged, its structure closely matches the homes of the Pinstresses. And also, inside, a pin can be still found, confirming that this was once a residence of a member of the Order. Both of the surviving sisters are actively hiding from the Citadel as indicated by their dialogue, so it stands to reason that the third sister attempted to do the same. And if one were seeking refuge from the Citadel, what better hiding spot than the region occupied by the bugs who openly despise the Citadel? We don't know whether there is any deeper meaning behind the location each sister chooses for their homes, but in this case, the choice feels deliberate. Beneath the putrefied docks resides the Stilkin tribe, a group whose hostility towards the Citadel is well established. They are easily recognized by their moss-like garments, which are strikingly similar to the clothing worn by this pinstress. This visual similarity may suggest a potential alliance, or at least an attempted one. It is possible that the pinstress attempted to ally herself with the Stilkin in order to plan something against the Citadel. However, just like the snail shaman we find in the Bilewater, it's clear that the Stilkin do not take kindly to outsiders. If so, the pinstress may have found herself isolated, unwilling to continue hiding, yet unable to act. This interpretation aligns closely with the needling text we find here. Must we hide, dear sisters, revered by all, feared by all? There's something important here that we haven't heard before, and that's feared by all. This is the first direct suggestion that the pinstresses were not merely respected, but actively feared, and if this is true, the Citadel may not have acted out of pure pragmatism, but out of fear. After acquiring the teachings and the knowledge they desired from the pinstresses, they may have attempted to eliminate them simply because their power was too great to be left unchecked. And that fear would be justified, because even when the Citadel deployed a giant chorus against a single pinstress, it proved insufficient. Another notable thing to mention here is that neither the pinstress nor the seamstress ever mention this fallen sister. Given that they are unaware of each other's current state, it is unlikely that they would know of this pinstress's death, so it's strange that not one of them asks about her well-being. This silence may point to a falling out between the sisters before her death, something reminiscent of the fractured relationship between the Nail Masters. Alongside the Pinstress's body, we also find the Wreath of Purity, an item that may hint at a far less noble death. Its description reads, a fragile band woven of reed and leaf crafted to repel the muck maggots, which raises a grim possibility. Despite her status, her strength, and her legacy, the Pinstress may have ultimately succumbed not to the Citadel nor the Stilkin, but rather to the grotesque game design of these maggots. Just like I mentioned earlier, there are several notable similarities between the Order of the Pinstresses and the Nail Masters. Aside from the obvious fact that there are three of them, their personalities and roles line up surprisingly well. The Seamstress, for example, seems to share the most similarities with the Nail Master Shio. Both characters have put down their weapons in a favor of a more peaceful lifestyle. Beyond that, they both seem to have grown tired of violence. In the Seamstress's case, this likely involves others dying directly by her hand, leading her to set aside her needle and focus on weaving and repairing. For Shio, even though he was exceptionally skilled with the nail, more so than his brothers ever were, the art of the nail mastery simply did not fulfill him on the personal level, so he ultimately finds fulfillment through art rather than violence. Another possible similarity lies in their strength. While it is never directly stated that the seamstress is the strongest of the pinstresses, unlike Shio, who is explicitly described that way, she is the only one with a feat that clearly surpasses others, that being the defeat of the fourth chorus. The final major similarity is that both characters are well-spoken and demonstrate a strong concern for their siblings. Shio mentions how happy he is when the knight becomes Maro's pupil, noting that Maro always wanted to be a teacher, and he also expresses concern for Oro. In a similar way, the seamstress is visibly relieved to learn that her sister is still alive when you meet her. Now shifting focus back to the pinstress herself, she seems to resemble Nailmaster Maro the most. Their personalities may not align as closely as Shio and the seamstress, but both Maro and the pinstress clearly strive to be teachers. From the moment you meet them, both of them are eager, almost pushy, to train you and pass down their skills. The pinstress initially pretends that Hornet is merely a disturbance, but considering that she has a clearly marked sign leading to her home, it becomes obvious that she desires companionship and a pupil to carry on her teachings. Hornet's own words reinforce this interpretation. In the Hunter's Journal entry, she praises the pinstress's willingness to teach and her enduring spirit despite long isolation. They also continuously strive to improve their weapon skills. Maro keeps his nails sharp and is clearly no stranger to hunting powerful beasts, as suggested by the room filled with skeleton trophies. Similarly, the pinstress mentions that she often duels the hunted pilgrims but finds little challenge in them. This is why she is so delighted to finally clash weapons with someone as strong as Hornet. That leaves the third pinstress, who lines up the most with Nailmaster Oro. Unfortunately, we can't say much with certainty here, as we know very little about the third pinstress. The only real source of information we have is her needle in text, but nevertheless, certain patterns are suggestive. Both the third pinstress and Oro seem to have distanced themselves the most from their comrades, choosing to live in the most isolated places they could find. From Sly's dialogue, we know Oro was considered the worst of the brothers with a nail, swinging it more like a club than a refined weapon. Likewise, the only pinstress we find defeated and dead is the third sister, which may suggest that she was eventually bested by someone more skilled than her, or the maggots. The complete lack of acknowledgement of the third pinstress by the other two may also imply a falling out, mirroring Oro's strained relationship with Maro. We never learn what exactly Oro did, but after obtaining Nailmaster's glory, Oro remarks that by aiding the knight, he might have redeemed himself. A similar unspoken failure may have occurred among the pinstresses before the third pinstress's death. That said, there remains one additional figure in Silksong who may be connected to the Order of the Pinstresses, and that's the Second Sentinel. At the present, the only evidence we have of this connection is that both the Second Sentinel and the Pinstress share an almost identical attack during their fights. Hidden deep within the Kagura core is what appears to be the final remnant of one's great order of the Sentinels. Hidden behind a secret wall, the Second Sentinel is found perfectly preserved inside a glass cylinder. Its chest cavity is opened, missing a crucial component called the cogwork heart. This heart has been deliberately removed and split into 3 separate pieces scattered throughout the citadel and sealed behind puzzles. Once all 3 pieces are recovered, the cogwork heart can be placed back into the second sentinel. If before inserting the heart, Hornet speaks to the 12th architect, we gain crucial information. The sentinels were created by the very first generation of the architects, using techniques and craftsmanship that can no longer be replicated in the present age. In other words, even by the Citadel standards, the sentinels were something exceptional. Long before the Cogwork Corps even existed, the sentinels were tasked with protecting the residents of the Citadel, but also with venturing beyond the walls to capture pilgrims and forcibly bring them back, which at that point sounds less like guardianship and more like imprisonment. Despite this morally questionable role, the sentinels themselves believed their duty to be sacred. This becomes clear once the second sentinel is reawakened, as it repeatedly refers to its charge as the holy duty, one meant to protect the citadel and the many voices that fill it. The problem, of course, is that those voices are gone. By the time the sentinel reawakens, the citadel has already fallen. The silk curse has corrupted nearly every living bug within its walls. Hornet herself informs the sentinel of this. During your slumber, the citadel has fallen, and its voices lay silent. This place is dead, or very nearly. Some would argue that standing guard over a kingdom's corpse is a foolish task, empty of meaning. I wonder then, will you still hold true to your charge? This line is a clear reflection of Hornet's own past, guarding the corpse of Hollownest long after its purpose has faded. She understands better than anyone what it means to cling to a duty that no longer has meaning. Yet despite this truth, the second sentinel refuses to abandon its purpose. After being restored, it can be found throughout the citadel, continuing to guard the pilgrims traveling to Songclave, performing its duty even though it is now futile. After meeting the sentinel throughout the citadel several times, a new wish appears in the Songclave called the Final Audience. Following it leads Hornet to a hidden chamber within the High Halls. Inside, the second sentinel awaits, surrounded by the remains of the other 4 sentinels, along with 4 silk flies, likely the power sources that once animated these now dead constructs. Here, Hornet is forced to fight the second sentinel, not out of malice, but as a test. The second sentinel challenges Hornet to determine whether she has been corrupted by the silk within her shell. As it states plainly, termination is necessary fate of all those enthralled by the whispering silk. And this reveals why the order of the sentinels was disassembled in the first place. They were built too pure enough to sense the danger of the silk and the haunting it carried, and pure enough to oppose it. But by that point, the bugs of the citadel had already begun willingly infusing silk into its denizens. And for the second sentinels to oppose the silken threads would have meant opposing the citadel itself, the very thing they were made to protect. During the battle, we see just how dangerous the sentinels truly were. They employ a wide array of techniques, parries and ripostes reminiscent of the silken children like Lace and Phantom, charged attacks strikingly similar to the Pinstresses attack, and this power blade ability reminiscent of the Shaman Crest attacks. The Sentinels appear to be the perfect synthesis of Pharloom's combative knowledge. It's no wonder the Citadel ultimately deemed them too dangerous to keep. An interesting side note is that the Sentinel fight was originally meant to take place in a completely different location, as seen in the early Silksong reveal footage. After being defeated, the second Sentinel realizes that Hornet Silk is pure and untouched by the curse. It expresses deep shame for attempting to kill her, believing it has failed its sacred duty. What's most striking here is the Sentinel's capacity for guilt. The intelligence and self-awareness of this construct goes far beyond anything else we encounter in Pharloom. The Sentinels seem less like a tool built to serve and more like an attempt to create life itself. As a final act of atonement, the second Sentinel bestows upon Hornet a token of its order, the Reverse Bind. This token granted by the Sentinel is immediately strange. According to its description, it exists to hold a bind's worth of silk, used when healing is needed and one's natural resources run low. That alone raises questions, because this is supposedly a token from an order that very clearly views silk as a form of corruption. So why would the Sentinel give to Hornet a tool designed specifically to store silk? One particularly interesting detail about the second Sentinel is that unlike almost every other construct in the Citadel, it does not have strings attached to it when Hornet starts needling. We know that creatures that are silk afflicted react violently to needling, yet the Sentinels show no such response. This combined with the outright resentment toward the Silk's curse suggests that the Sentinels may not be powered by silk flies in the same way other automatons are. At first glance, this seems contradictory, since we do see silk flies appear closely associated with the Sentinel machinery. But here's the thing, silk flies may not actually be silk-based at all. Put your tinfoil hats on for this one. The term silk flies only appears in the game files, which are not strictly canonical. More importantly, identical creatures appear in the Huntress Queen Carmelita's arena, a point in Pharloom's timeline that predates the Citadel and the Silk Siphon entirely. If silk flies were created through the silk extraction, then their presence here shouldn't be possible. This raises a possibility that silk flies are not silk-based at all, but rather soul-based entities that simply became a byproduct of the silk siphon later on. Another theory is that the Cogburg heart itself was simply so advanced that it could sustain something resembling life without requiring any external power sources, no silk, and no soul. Just pure mechanical ingenuity far beyond anything else in Pharloom. However, a few details strongly suggest that the Sentinels are in fact powered by silk flies after all. Most notably, during the final audience fight, we see 4 dead Sentinels in the background and 4 silk flies actively moving around the area. The parallel feels too deliberate to be a coincidence. So, if the Sentinels are powered by the silk flies, the next question becomes, why aren't they corrupted by the Silk's curse? And the answer may be the same as it was with the Radiance's infection. Just like before, individuals with exceptionally strong wills are able to resist the curse, and even if the Sentinels are nothing more than souls bound inside metal shells, willpower may still matter. The Order of the Pinstresses is one of the few groups in Pharloom explicitly defined by their discipline, tradition, and exceptional mental fortitude. Maybe, instead of just disbanding and killing the Pinstresses, the Citadel may have tried to capture, transform, and repurpose them into more obedient and less likely to rebel servants with similar affinity for the Pin, but easier to control. But even with all this effort, it seems as if the Sentinels were still a bit too much for the Citadel to control and they had to deactivate them. Now, I could go even further down the rabbit hole here, like there is still unused sprites of the Sentinel wrapped in vines. There is unused sprites of the Sentinel being dead after the final audience. There are sketches of the Pinstresses in the R. Gibson's old sketchbook that don't really tell us anything about the story but are still interesting to think about. But at this point I think that's enough tinfoil head rambling. This video has already strayed quite far from its original focus of the Pinstresses lore, and before we spiral any further, it's probably best to stop here. So let's now summarize everything we know about the Pinstresses. The Order of the Pinstresses was a small but highly skilled group of warriors in Pharloom trained in the use of the pins. By the time Silksong takes place, the Order has nearly vanished. Only 3 Pinstresses are ever seen. One is dead, one has abandoned combat for a peaceful life, and only one still actively upholds the old traditions. Each of the Pinstresses lives at the edge of Pharloom, a deliberate choice meant to distance them from the Grand Citadel. According to the Pinstress herself, the Citadel once worked alongside the Order and benefited from their teachings, before eventually turning against them and forcing them into a life of hiding. The remaining active Pinstress resides in the Blasted Steppes, where she teaches Hornet the Needle Strike ability. The Seamstress, the second living member, lives in Farfields. She abandoned combat entirely and provides Hornet with the Drifter's Cloak. She was also highly targeted by the Citadel, with even the Chorus being sent to claim her life. There is also a third Pinstress who can be found in the Putrefied Docks near the Rite of Purity, who has long since passed away. Aside from these 3 sisters, there also appears to be a possible connection between the Pinstresses and the Sentinels. And that's everything we currently know about the Order of the Pinstresses. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing, it helps out more than you might think. And if you saw any mistakes in the video or have thoughts on your own about this subject, consider leaving a comment. But for now, that's it, and goodbye.